My name is Pat VanHaverbeke. I am a land surveyor with Major Consulting. I happen to specialize in both UAS and solar development projects. And today I'm going to give this presentation called Leveraging UAS for Solar Projects. All right, so with that said, let's get started. I'd like to begin with the current condition of the solar market. Right now, things are looking very good. There's talks about some COVID stimulus where the government's going to throw some money towards renewable energy development. There's the potential for a new administration starting early next year, and there's speculation there that that might have some kind of effect on solar investment. Technology is getting better. With that, prices for developing this stuff are getting less expensive. The technology lasts longer, is cheaper. Overall, there is a lot of reason to invest in solar today. That all adds up to a bright future for all of us who are currently working in the industry, and I'm looking forward to being a part of it. So, there's two sides to every coin. Yes, there's lots of activity. Yes, things are looking bright, but there are also downsides to that. And one of those is that with increased competition comes increased competition for sites. There's added scrutiny from towns. There's new zoning ordinances. There's lots of governmental roadblocks that weren't in place a couple of years ago that are becoming, I don't want to call them a problem. They're all for the benefit of the public, but they're just more expenses and more hoops to jump through to get anything built anymore. So with all that being said, everybody's for an edge. Any room on a project where we can increase efficiencies, accomplish more than one task at a time, do something faster, less expensive, is a benefit to everybody and is only going to help make our projects more profitable in the end. One of the ways that we've been doing that at Major is by implementing UAS or drones on a lot of different phases of solar projects. Just before we get into what we are doing with them, I just want to reiterate to everybody that flying UAS for commercial purposes requires a license or authorization by the FAA before you are legally able to do that. It's not hard. You have to study, you have to take a test, but you have to do it, or else there's potential for heavy fines and civil penalties. There's lots of different UAS on the market out there right now. The way that we look at UAS here is basically they are just a means to carry a sensor, whether that be a regular, RGB camera or a LiDAR sensor or a FLIR thermal camera, just a way to get that sensor into a place that was previously difficult to get it to unless you hired a helicopter or a manned aircraft, which can get expensive. So with that being said, there's a whole, we use a couple different platforms here. We have the whole, array of sensors that we're using on a daily basis. And we have found that they have been hugely helpful in increasing our efficiencies and reducing costs to our clients. So it all starts at the beginning of a solar project with the site selection and any due diligence work that comes with that. For this aspect of the project, we would choose typically a RGB sensor. Any platform your DJI, anywhere from $600 to $5,000 sensor, prosumer, as a lot of people call it, works for this. Basically, what we're doing is sending one person out to the field to capture site photos that represent the existing conditions at the time of capture, and all of that can go back to the office and be examined by anybody who's involved with the project. In this day and age, we've all been living through the COVID scare for, 6 months into this thing now. That means instead of sending a whole team of folks out to the field to perform these site assessments, we can send one guy, typically, a junior engineer or just a pilot, and they can, under direction, capture images of any location in the site. If you need to get closer for more detail, it's just a matter of flying closer and doing that, and deliver all those photos back to the office for assessment. Sometimes, and I think we're all guilty of that a little bit. It's easy just to pull up Google Earth and try to see what we're looking at that way. And it's a great tool, but especially in rural areas where a lot of this solar development is happening, the Google Earth imagery can be 5 years old or more, and is not always an accurate representation of what's going on out there. People can build a lot of stuff in 5 years. So once we get through the due diligence phase, we move into typically performing any boundary survey work and graphic survey, so that we can get the design going. Enter the LiDAR scanner at this point. This site in particular, we just did I think I issued this map last week. As you can see from the PDF image on the left, it's a pretty significant terrain out there. And the lower right-hand corner is an aerial view. You can see the yellow line there. That kind of is our limits. It's all woods. To have a traditional survey crew out there trying to topo this on the ground would take weeks. I think we had the flight team out here for half an hour, or not half an hour, but half a day, setting photo control, LiDAR control, performing the flights, gathering shots to check the data against after it was processed. And that was it. One stop out there, we have everything we need. We generated the surface. We also have the tree heights, which I'll get into coming up, but it's one visit to the field and a whole treasure trove of data that we can extract throughout the course of the project. So a lot of us and a lot of solar developers are using publicly available LiDAR at the beginning of a project. It's free. Generally, it's accurate enough to produce 2-foot contours. But what we recommend, and which ends up saving money in the long run when these projects move forward, is just fly it from the beginning. We don't have to process and register all the data all at once. We can out a quick 2-foot surface so you can get a basic feel of the land, and then when the project moves forward, the field work is already done. You can say, yep, go ahead and refine your mapping, give us some finished topography, and we don't have to make another visit to the field. That data that is publicly available is also generally far more sparse than what we would collect. So for this site, for example, it might not, in fact, it probably does not get penetration through the canopy unless they flew it during leaf off, which is probably likely, actually. But the way that we fly on with our UAS, we're flying slower. We're flying far closer to the ground than a manned aircraft would, typically 350 feet or so off the ground. And with that recipe, we're collecting over 100 points per square meter, usually 3 times that many. But a manned aircraft company would promise probably 20 points per square meter, and they look at you funny sometimes when you ask them for more than that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that there is no time of year typically when we cannot fly a solar site and produce 1-foot contours. Leaves are not a problem. And we're not limited to the fall leaf off season to get your sites collected. This is just another example of a topographic survey we did. So this site, all those lighter areas in the middle, there were prior to this survey fully wooded. The client, had a design surface. They produced the design. They went out, they cleared all the trees, did all the drainage work, installed retention ponds, so forth, and then asked us to go out and perform another topographic survey to ensure that all the site work was performed according to the design. And it was, but this, I don't know, I don't remember how many hundreds of acres this was, but again, we were out there for half a day. We got the LiDAR work done. We flew it for an ortho photo, which you can see in the background there. And the project was able to move forward knowing that they weren't going to run into issues with the racking or anything like that because their design surface criteria was met. So I mentioned this before a little bit. One of the other critical aspects of a solar project is the shading, typically from trees. And in the past, let's just say that the tree heights that are provided are sketchy at best. A surveyor or an engineer, somebody would stand out in the middle of the field with a laser or just a handheld inclinometer, measure an angle and ballpark a distance to the treetops and kind of sketch in a rough profile of what that looked like. Now, with the UAS technology, whether it be photo-based or with LiDAR, we can fly the site, capture all sorts of data, and provide you tree heights that are far more accurate in way less time. So that allows, when they're in the office, that allows them to design for the tightest production modeling possible. And also very important to the solar developers is it minimizes tree clearing. Now we can decide exactly which trees are going to be an issue and remove only those which I'm sure you've seen on the permitting side can be a problem sometimes. So this example here was done photo-based. We flew this, collected a whole bunch of images, processed them, and from that we're able to generate these tree heights. That process works okay. There's some limitations to it. If it's windy out, the software has a problem sometimes registering the data because it's trying to match pixels together, and if the tree top is in a different location in every picture, then it gets really confusing for the software. So this is an option, but what we've been doing more and more so lately is just flying with the LiDAR helicopter. The LiDAR is an active sensor. There is no processing in the background to stitch images together or triangulate a position. It's a direct reading, So that being said, it's far more accurate, and it's faster too, to be honest. So this image here is a half-built site. You can see the array on the right is in, the array on the left, half the racking is in, half the panels are in. But the gray lines around the perimeter of that are actually contour lines that model the tops of the trees. So that once we have that model, that can be brought into a lot of the usual design software, like PVSys, for example, and the shading analysis can be done far more accurately than in the past and faster. On top of that, when we fly these sites with LiDAR, not only do we have the treetops, but we have the X, Y, and Z location of anything you can see here. We could, extract what the current ground conditions look like. We have the location of all of the arrays. There's just a ton of information that we can go back to over and over again to provide more deliverables as the project progresses. So once the solar development is completed, before they get sold, a lot of times we'll be asked to provide as-built surveys. So basically, we will go out there. These, unless they require a topographic survey, also we will do photo-based. We'll go out. We'll tie into existing project control. We'll fly the site again, process everything, generate an ortho photo, and provide that to our CAD team so they can extract everything that was built, add it to our existing survey to show to any potential buyers that, yes, this is what was built, and yes, it was all built within the limits of the lease area as it was laid out. All right, so the site is sold, or it's commissioned, it's operational. All right, so now we got 20 years that we have to babysit the arrays and make sure everything is still operating according to specs. That's where our FLIR or thermal imagery sensor comes in, along with the regular traditional camera. We can go out, we can fly these sites very quickly. From our understanding, inspecting sites in this method year to year is up to 50 times faster than the traditional boots on the ground method. We can fly a site in half an hour that would take, a half a day for a team to go out and walk and do manually. Not only that, typically these sites have to get inspected yearly. We can fly them the same exact way, provide the same exact deliverables from year to year, and in order for some change detection software to be used. And we can say, okay, this is what this looked like last year. This is what it looks like now. It looks like we have an issue here. There's possible degradation, or there's other things that we're looking for out there, like, okay, this panel is just gone, maybe it blew away, who knows. But there's lots of different things that we can find using UAS during these inspections. Typically, connection and physical damage issues are the most prevalent, and they're also the easiest for us to discover with photos. There's a handful of other uses, and there's more coming all the time. It's crazy. I've been involved in this technology for the last 4 years, and which doesn't sound like a long time, but if I think about 4 years ago, what we were doing with it and what we're doing with it now, it's exponentially grown since then, and it's only going to grow faster. here at Mazer, we have the luxury of having the support of our management staff to encourage us to invest in the latest and greatest technology so that we can, provide the best possible service to our clients. That's one of the reasons I love working here. So a couple other potential uses, construction monitoring. That's what we see here. You can fly this once a week, twice a week, every day at the end of the day, and document and report to any stakeholders how the progress is proceeding. It provides a legacy record. There's no disputing the photo, right? And you can train, like, these things are not hard to fly. Yes, they do require a license, but a little bit of practice and a laborer can be taught how to fly these things, so they can just do it at the end of every day, and then you have it. They can also be used for post-construction for marketing photos. Take a nice pretty picture to send to any potential buyers. One of my team members this morning called it litigation mitigation. Photo evidence is, generally irrefutable in court. So if you have a landowner that says, oh, well, you trashed my field or did whatever, if you have photo evidence to back up the conditions of the site when you left, you're not going to have to deal with a whole lot of those problems. So wrapping up here, I hope my intent over the last 20 minutes was to kind of show you that, yes, there are challenges facing our market right now. There's, competition is fierce. We all are looking for ways to gain a competitive edge. And from our experience, UAS is one of the best so far that we've found. Our turnaround times for topographic surveys, inspection surveys, all that kind of stuff has improved dramatically. Our data sets are more complete, meaning that with the LiDAR data, for example, we go out once, we collect a huge amount of data, and instead of having to go back out to the field every time there's a change order or anytime the town asks for the next light poles or the connections at the next set of wires, we have that. We can just have one of our computer technicians pull that data out and map it, and we don't have to go back to the field. Which leads into the next bullet point: fewer return visits to sites. Conventional surveying it's an art and a science, and sometimes things get missed. The field guys might not see an invert when they're walking by. There might be a utility manhole that they miss. It happens. But if you have photo data and LiDAR data, you can pull that out from the office, and you don't have to deploy a crew back to the site, which can take days, and then it's got to get mapped. It's huge. It's repeatable. That's more to do with the inspection work. Like I said, year to year, we can follow the same exact flight path, provide the same exact report, and everything's uniform. So it's very easy to compare every year's data and see any changes that are happening over time. And at the end of the day, this all adds up to increased efficiency and profitability, which is really, why we're all here. It's great. There's the side benefit that we're producing clean energy here that is now cheaper than oil and gas, and we're helping the environment. But at the end of the day, we're all here to earn a living, and this is a great tool to help us achieve that. So with that, I'm going to bring it to a close. We'll answer any questions. Thanks for coming. I want to just say before we move on here that if you have any questions, feel free to email them to surveywebinars@mazerconsulting.com. and we will get an answer back to you as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. We have a few questions here. The question here is from Kevin. How far away are you able to fly?
So it depends on the platform and the terrain and everything. I mentioned before that you need to have a 107 license in order to provide these services. The 107 regulations require that you maintain visual contact with your drone at all times. So, for example, the smaller drones that we use for photo-based stuff, 1,500 feet maybe, but the large helicopter that we use for LiDAR, that thing is 6 feet long and weighs 50 pounds, so we can push that out to 1.5 miles and still be able to maintain line of sight.
Okay, thank you. A question from Dan. What is the range of the LiDAR?
So I guess back to the 107 regulations, we are not allowed to fly more than 400 feet generally above the surface of the ground. The LiDAR sensor that we use was actually designed for manned aircraft. We can fly at 400 feet, no problem, and get great penetration through the tree canopy.
Okay, thank you. A question from Sharon. How can you tell if a panel is not working during an inspection?
So I think I mentioned before that we can best detect connection issues and physical damage. Connection issues, generally, I mean, the solar panel is still producing energy, but if that energy cannot move from panel to panel and get fed into the system, then it creates resistance, which creates heat. The FLIR or thermal cameras that we're using will detect those heat as hotspots, and the artificial intelligence software that we use to help process those inspection reports, basically how those work is it goes through all the images and is detecting from cell to cell, comparing temperatures, and flags any of those hotspots. So that's how we can tell where there are connection issues. The physical damage stuff is more of a manual process. We can go through and see micro cracking, areas where there's soil, dirt or whatever on the solar panels, shading from trees, etc.
Okay, thank you. That does it for the questions here. So, any last remarks or comments before we wrap up the webinar?
I just want to thank everybody again for coming. Reiterate that they can get in touch with us at surveywebinars@mazerconsulting.com. And thanks for listening.